Save the Semantics, episode 265. It is July 27th, 2024. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a Saturday morning because the weather's not too bad. It's actually overcast right now. And it's not expected to be super hot today, which is very nice. Nice little change of pace. A little sprinkle of overcast clouds during the sunny days, you know what I mean? Yeah, and wanted to go for a little walk and record at the same time, so taking advantage of that. I actually tried to record earlier this week. I tried to record around like Tuesday or Wednesday, but I just was not in the right headspace to put anything out. What I was kind of feeling earlier this week, I was like in a weird kind of like rambly sort of mood. And I think I was going to talk a bit about politics, which I hate discussing, you know what I mean? Which I hate getting into. I wanted to like unload some stuff off of my chest, but it just never felt right. It never felt like it was going to materialize in the way that I wanted to. So yeah. And I also tried to record yesterday as well. And I did record something, but I just did not. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. It was too much in the vein of talking about our political climate and that sort of thing. And maybe I made some good points here and there. I don't know. I think there could be something that I could take away from it, but ultimately I just didn't like what I put out, so I think I'm gonna just scrap it altogether. Really, the gist of it was just to kind of summarize. Earlier this week, what happened was our current president, President Biden, dropped out in the current race, and for this year's presidential election, and then Kamala Harris is sort of the presumptive nominee and all of that. It was just such like a whiplash of news going back and forth between the Trump assassination to Biden dropping out to Harris being sort of not nominated. It's just such like the news cycle, the way in which certain news organizations reported it. It was so much shit in just like a short span of time. Everything was just like this crazy like overreaction of sorts. And again, I'm someone who doesn't, and I actively try not to get sucked into the news. I feel that I have a pretty healthy balance of consuming news and staying on top of things, but I've just got wrapped up in it because it was so much in just the forefront of everything, and it was not good. And I think the way that I was going to essentially initially talk about it was just not I don't think it was going to be very cohesive, and I did not like what I was going to put out. So I decided not to go with it, which I think is probably for the best. I mean, I do talk about, and I have talked about some of the current events and whatnot. I do get into that for sure when I do feel it is important. And in some cases, what is happening is important, but I just don't feel that I added anything to the conversation in which other people already haven't. You know what I mean? Or if they already have, discuss these things, and it's just like, what am I like? I don't think my ramblings and my sort of thoughts were gonna be super. It's gonna be super novel by any means. So, I decided to just kind of hold off on that. But really, it was a lot, and I think it's one of those things where it's worthwhile to step away and just reflect on things and whatnot before just giving your like, oh yeah, let's jump on board. Like let's just get on, let's just you got to get all in or you're all out. It's too much. It's way too much. So I was like, nah, I'm good. I'm actually not going to get into it. Maybe one of these days I'll talk about more political stuff, but it's just not something that I'm not the most informed, and maybe I should be. Maybe I should be more aware of the going ons, and in the world of bureaucracy. But I just am not. Yeah, I'm not gonna get into it for the time being. So yeah, that's kind of where my headspace was earlier this week, and even kind of throughout the week in general. So the Olympics have started. The opening ceremony was yesterday or a couple days ago. And it was interesting what I did. I didn't watch the whole thing, obviously, because it's way too long. But it was like interesting how they went about it this time around in Paris, where they had each country. I think some countries shared a boat, but for the most part, I think each country had their own boat dedicated to them, with the athletes and everything. And it seems like a cool setup, but it also feels like maybe a bit of a logistical nightmare, like having just like hundreds of these boats in the harbor or whatever. It just seems like a lot of work and preparation, as opposed to what is typically done, where the each country kind of walks and is sort of like introduced walking onto the track field, what's usually kind of done. I feel it's sort of like a marching band of sorts. I feel that it might be a little easier to do something like that. It's probably still incredibly difficult to coordinate everything. Oh my God, dude. Could you imagine being the opening ceremony coordinator for those things? Just like hundreds of thousands of people, all of these different countries that speak different languages. Like, dude, it's gotta be it's gotta be like a shit show to deal with that. And then you gotta do that with boats. Like, dude, I don't even know how. You gotta have just the utmost like patience, and just you gotta have some resolve to be able to just handle that kind of thing. You know what I mean? I didn't even, it's cool, I guess, but also it just seems like way too much to deal with. But I didn't watch really. I saw, each country. I didn't really see much else beyond that. Celine Dion apparently performed. I haven't watched that yet. Maybe I'll check it out. Apparently she did a nice little performance. She's dealing with her like health problems and stuff. So, I mean, just like the fact that she was able to put out a performance, I think is pretty impressive. I'll have to check it out, and see kind of what she did, because apparently it was pretty impressive. But yeah, Olympics started. There were some games earlier on today, which is cool. There's a game later today that I do want to check out. I think it's like Greece and then somebody else. So it would be cool to see Giannis play. And then Serbia and the US is tomorrow. Very excited for that game. Honestly, I was thinking I was going to like hold off on talking about, maybe hold off on this podcast to kind of delve into it next week, but it's fine. This is going to be a shorter episode this week, by the way. I don't think I'm going to do a two-parter since it's already the weekend. So this might be a bit of a shorter one. But I'm excited to see that game. That's going to be tough, man. Obviously Jokic, but Bogdanovic has been playing his ass off too. I think that's going to be a good matchup. I don't think it's going to come easy. Again, I'm reiterating what I've been saying for the last couple of episodes. It's not going to be a cakewalk. It really isn't. This is going to be a tough tournament. There's a lot of really great countries out there that have a lot of great players. That have a lot of NBA players too. So it's not going to be anything. It's not going to be what it used to be at all. So I'm excited to see some competition, man. I don't want it to just be the U.S. kicking everyone's ass. That's not exciting. That's not a very interesting tournament, right? I mean, we kind of saw that with the the NBA playoffs this year, right? Like the Celtics kind of sort of bulldozed their way into the Eastern Conference Finals, and the finals themselves was not very interesting. So it's the hope is that there's going to be some level competition, and I think we're going to get that. So I'm excited to see that game tomorrow, and I'll obviously talk about that. Next week. I have been continuing on with my Final Fantasy X playthrough. I am near the end of the game, and right now I'm just kind of going through and grinding the players, leveling them up, that sort of thing. I've actually enjoyed kind of going through that process and building up the characters and getting their like stats and getting more skills and affinities and that sort of thing. I think that there is like side content. I'm actually gonna get into that in a little bit. I want to kind of talk about some of the criticisms that I have with the game and how it sort of lines up with maybe some other people's criticisms as well. But I've actually enjoyed the grind a little bit. I think it's been fun to, get the characters, the characters of my choosing as strong as possible, and just to have them get these abilities. I think the sphere grid system is pretty fun. It's where it is now, since the beginning, is sort of cool to see the progression of it, because the characters that you sort of start with kind of start off with, they start off with sort of these like base stats, and if you follow along with just like the sphere nodes, you more or less get like, the character's like typical build. But if you want to kind of switch it up, you can have them gain access to abilities that they normally wouldn't, and that's pretty cool. And so I kind of want to build out the characters in the way that I want, and spend a bit more time with it before I go into the final dungeon, the final section of the game, which which I'm anticipating to be kind of the next part. That's pretty exciting. I think it's fun to get these characters to kind of a spot where I feel confident going into the final battle. Maybe not to the point of over leveling, because I do want maybe a bit of a challenge, but just sort of just getting them to like the best place possible, kind of not maximizing, but having them just be like a strong character for the end game. Other than that, I'm saying the same thing that I sort of said. I gushed about the story last time, so once I do finish the game, I do want to get into maybe the specifics of the game and talk about, the themes that I sort of resonated with, and how I felt about the story overall. I think that I'm very interested in how the story wraps up. I'm very interested in seeing, where these characters' arcs eventually end up. I think that'll be pretty interesting. It's gonna be. I think it's gonna be kind of maybe a sort of a melancholy ending. I think that's sort of what I'm expecting. Maybe even a sad ending. That's sort of what it feels like it's kind of leading up to. So, in terms of like the emotional impact and that sort of thing, I'm sort of like, I'm excited for it. I'm also just very curious to see how things go eventually. Let's talk a little bit about the criticisms that I have for the game, because I think some of that is a little warranted since I've been really just, I've been praising this game quite a bit. Um, a lot of my critiques are very much in line with what other people have already said, 20 years ago when this game came out. I think that the side content in this game is pretty lacking and honestly not great at all. It's pretty it's very kind of ridiculous, some of the hoops that you have to go through in order to obtain like the strongest weapons and get get the best gear for your characters. I think that the essentially what so for example, what you have to do for Titus is really frustrating. Essentially, you have to do these races, and these races are just ridiculously difficult to the point where it's RNG. It's kind of randomized, so you have to get lucky in order to complete some of them, complete some of the challenges. And I think that it's just it's that that is like not at all in line with what the rest of the gameplay is, which is, combat. And it's just, I don't know. I think it's just such a ridiculous ask of the player to completely switch their mindset and completely just throw them off balance, to do something that has really nothing related to the rest of the game, is very silly and just kind of ridiculous. And I I just don't understand why they decided to do it and why it is such a frustrating experience. Like, it's not fun at all. It is just like this, you know, annoying grind. Like, maybe some people enjoy the quote unquote difficulty with it, but none of it is like a lot of it is just not based on player skill. It really isn't. It's randomized. It's the controls are just wonky. It doesn't work well. It's just not good. I think for Waka, what you have to do is you have to play, blitzball, which makes sense because that's in the context of the story. And if you get good at the game, it's like, okay, that makes a little bit more sense. But with Titus's challenge, it's like, what? Chocobo racing? Like, what the hell does this have to do with anything? Like, and it's such a small section of the game too. Like, it's not even, there are chocobos like in the game, but they're not like the forefront. They're not prominent, front and center character. They're kind of like it's like a side activity, and it's so ridiculous and silly, and it just doesn't make any sense. And it's frustrating to play, and it's not fun. I did get his weapon. I did get his sort of ultimate weapon, but in order to fully upgrade it, what you have to do is you have to do the races almost perfectly. And I'm like, I'm good. I'm good. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with that. That just doesn't seem fun at all. And I'm just gonna hold off on like doing any of that. It just seems kind of ridiculous. So I think what I'm gonna do for the rest of the playthrough is just again just level up the characters that I want to get them to a good spot, have them gain access to abilities to, have them be as prepared as possible for the final battle or whatever, and then we'll see this thing through. I don't know if I'm gonna beat it today or this weekend, but it's possible that I might. Honestly, I'm pretty close to the end, so I think that it seems to be kind of smooth sailing for the rest of the way through. One other criticism that I have, and I think it's sort of, for some people it might be like a pretty significant criticism. For myself, I don't think it was super detrimental for the rest of the game. And that's kind of the exploration aspect of it. I touched upon this, but this game is very single lane focused, where there isn't really a ton of detractors for you to kind of explore areas. There's really not a ton to explore outside of what you were already doing, in sort of the path that you're taking. And that is a little disappointing for sure. I think having a bit more variety in the landscape and the environments could just make it, just could incentivize the players to do more in those areas. But when you really just have like a single path forward, it just doesn't really give, it just doesn't give a ton of, it just doesn't give a lot. And I think that can be a little disappointing for players. Another thing is that there's no world map. You're really just selecting, once you get to like the end of the game, basically, you have the ability to select areas to kind of fast travel to, basically. But outside of that, there's no world map. There's no exploration. And I think that can be a little disappointing for some players. I think that a big aspect of Final Fantasy in general is this sense of a huge world. And I think with this game in particular, you feel that it feels very compact. It doesn't seem, on the map itself, it does visually show you that areas are, where areas are and how far away they are from them on the map and that sort of thing. But you just don't get a sense of the scale of the world. The world feels very small in this case, and I don't think you get and maybe this is, maybe I'll get a better read of it once I do finish completing the game. But you maybe don't get the same impact as you do of like the world is under threat, because everything is so, there's just areas that you kind of jump to, but it's not like, it doesn't feel interconnected. So I think that is something that's kind of at a loss, because there is no map of sorts. You don't get to travel from point A to point B, as you would in in pretty much all the other Final Fantasies, except maybe like 13, right? So it's a little disappointing for sure. I think you do lose that feeling of exploration, and you lose that feeling of, going on this like grand whirlwind adventure, because you're not traversing on this sort of interconnected world, right? You're just kind of going from checkpoint to checkpoint, in a blink of an eye, without really any you know sort of travel time in between. I will say though, I didn't realize that this game was as like, it's a pretty, it's 35-40 hours to beat this game, if you really kind of just stick to the main story, which is what primarily this game is. But it's really not that as long as I expect it to be, because I think my sort of expectation with most JRPGs is that they're going to be 50 plus 100 hours, right? But this one, it's relatively compact, and I think for someone like myself who does really value story and kind of the drive of the plot and the characters more so than anything else when playing these games, I think that this could be a really good game for someone that is looking for something like that. But if you do value and you do really want to get some deep RPG mechanics from a game, then this game, I don't know, it's not the most deep and interesting. I think there are you could definitely find ways to get the most out of the sphere grid system and that sort of thing, but outside of that, it's pretty straightforward. It's a pretty simple battle system, but that's fine for me. I think that when I am really looking for something that kind of hones in on a certain aspect, I think that this really, you know, with a heavy focus with it, I think it allows the game to kind of build that up and strengthen its story and have a strong story so that you do connect with the characters and the themes and all of those things. So I think that this is a really it does service its narrative very well in the way the game is constructed. But I think that because there is maybe a lack of some RPG mechanics, that it might sort of deter some players from picking it up. But if you are someone like me where you really are looking for an intimate story, I think this is right up your alley. So I would recommend. When I do beat the game, I do want to talk in detail of the story. So I'll put up like a, I'll do what I did for Tears of the Kingdom. Where I'll put like a, little spoiler tag in the title of the game, or the title of the podcast. So if anybody wants to actually get into the game, then maybe they can hold off on listening. But yeah, those are kind of my criticisms. Again, really pretty much in line with what most other people have said. There's not a lot of exploration, no world map, and the side content is not great. It's really not the best. And what you have to do to get the best gear for your characters is annoying and just not at all in line with what the rest of the game looks like. So it's that sort of aspect is a little disappointing, but honestly, other than that, I don't have too many other complaints. My sort of my issues line up more with the like the outside of the core game issues that I do have. I do want to talk about some of the issues that I have had with the HD remaster version of the game. There are instances where the game crashes when you have a certain character use like an ability in a specific area of the game, which is really stupid, and I don't understand why they didn't address this bug. Like if you're leveling and then you accidentally use this ability, the game will just crash and you lose all of your progress. Like that's stupid. That's silly, and that should not be happening with a game like a remastered version of the game, right? And the fact that there's like not a ton of quality of life updates is also kind of annoying too. Luckily, this game is pretty it's pretty easy in the terms of, you don't have to go super far in order to get back to your save point, but the save points are sort of scattered in areas, so you don't have quick save, you don't have auto save, you don't have the ability to save in areas, because apparently these are things that are already like embedded in the game itself. So I don't know, like, is it really that much work to rework the game to make those changes? Like, it's just kind of annoying. You can't skip cutscenes, which is also silly, and I think that's also an issue with how the original PS2 game was developed, and I guess Square just didn't, Square Enix now didn't want to go through the effort of trying to implement those changes into the newest version of the game. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's kind of silly. It's not that big of a deal, and I personally don't find it to be too big of an issue, luckily. But I think having some of those options available, I think, would allow newer players to have a bit more ease getting into this game, because if this is maybe like someone's first RPG, it might be a bit tough just because of the pace of the game, and this is a 20-year-old game. But I mean, I've been playing these types of games all my life, so it's not that big of an issue for me. But maybe for some people, if they don't have those modern qualities to it, it might detract them from picking this up. So I don't know. It's just kind of annoying and a little frustrating. It's much more in the sense of maybe corporate decisions, less so than the actual game development. But I don't know. I just don't know why they didn't include some of those updates. Would it have been really difficult to include them? I mean, they did it for, they did it for Final Fantasy VII, and I'm assuming they did it for the other PS1 Final Fantasies, but they couldn't do it for the PS2 version. I don't know. It's just kind of funny to me, and it's a little interesting that they can't do those changes. But I'm not a developer, so I have no idea how much work it would take to get those changes to work on a remastered version of the game. So I don't know what I'm talking about really, but it's just kind of annoying. But yeah, I'm reaching the end of the game. Again, I'll talk about this next week when I'm expecting to beat the game. That's sort of my kind of, what I'm thinking is going to be the timeline. And I what I've been doing recently, and I've said this before, is I like to kind of break up going from one RPG to the next. But I did pick up Unicorn Overlord, and I think I'm gonna dive into it. I think I'm just gonna get into it. It's also a game where I've heard the story is not really the center front of, it's not the strong point of the game. So, and it seems like it's just like a really fun experience. So, instead of getting kind of, invested in another like huge story or anything like that, I think this just might be a good game to just like get into and spend a lot of time with. And again, I've been really, I feel like I've had like a decent, pattern of, splitting up and divvying up the time that I do spend with, more story heavy games with something that's like a shorter game and not as extensive. But I've been really wanting to get into Unicorn Overlord, and based on the praise that I've seen it being received, I'm really excited to dive into it. I did not try the demo again, so I'm kind of going into it semi-blind. I have some expectations because I know that it's developed by Vanillaware and all of these things, and I think the quality of it is going to be really great. But outside of that, I don't know really what to expect. It seems really pretty. I like the art style. It looks beautiful. The soundtrack, of course, sounds really great. So yeah, I think that's going to be the next game that I get into after I wrap up 10. Unless anything changes and maybe I just want to dive into something else again. That is probably what's going to be coming up. So yeah, I'll obviously talk about it when I do eventually get to it. And yeah, I think I'll probably hold off on discussing 10 after I beat it. So shorter one this week. Not a ton to really discuss outside of kind of what I've been getting into and how I've been progressing with Final Fantasy. The world's on fire. And I initially wanted to talk about it, but I decided not to. Yeah, that's probably going to do it for this week. Shorter episode this time. I know. I'm going to get back into half-hour segments instead of hour and a half ones. But yeah, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thanks for always for listening. This has been Save the Semantics, signing off.